With exactly 9 weeks to go until the midterm elections, strategists continue to point out undeniable signs that the seismic shift in the political landscape following the Supreme Court's decision to overrule abortion in America is playing out in Democrats' favor. What was once expected to potentially be a red wave that could actually now become a Roe wave, thanks to the surge of women registering to vote in the weeks after that decision came down. That surge and that issue on the ballot, so unprecedented. An election and data analyst writing in the New York Times predicts we should, quote, throw old political assumptions out the window and consider that Democrats could buck historic trends this year. Tom Bonnier of Target Smart writes this, quote, for many Americans, confronting the loss of abortion rights was different from anticipating it. In my 28 years of analyzing elections, I have never seen anything like what has happened in the past 2 months in American politics. Women are registering to vote in numbers I have never witnessed. I have run out of superlatives to describe how different this moment is. Joining our conversation, former White House press secretary under President Barack Obama and MSNBC political analyst Robert Gibbs. Claire is still here. I guess part of me wonders if maybe they'd talk to a woman before they overturned Roe versus Wade or put into place the laws. I mean, this was a strategy on the right, and I've talked about it as the dog catching the car. But the truth is the political consequences, I think, a very small consolation for the death and illness that women will suffer in the time it takes the country to wake up and say, no, I don't want to live out Handmaid's Tale. I mean, what do you make of sort of the political reality, which is welcome to anyone who doesn't support living in a country where these choices are made outside of a family and a doctor's office, and the political boom that may be lowered on the Republicans who support them?
One thing the Kansas vote showed, not only an amazing turnout, not only a skyrocketing number of women registering to vote after the Dobbs decision, but a bunch of Republicans voted for abortion rights in Kansas. There's no other way to do the numbers. The question is, will those Republicans who feel strongly about abortion rights, will they feel so strongly that they will vote for a Democrat in November? That's really what people are struggling with right now, that are trying to figure out what's going to happen. I will say this. I think women were startled into a reality, especially younger women, that this right had been taken away. But you know what the salt in the wound was, Nicole? Was that all these Republican legislatures across the country that were so calcified, ruby red, far right, go Donald Trump, they decided to go one step further and say, oh, the Supreme Court tells us we can decide? By the way, if your daughter is raped and she's pregnant, you're out of luck. And when women hear that, when they don't have a rape and incest exception, when they don't make it clear that IVF is still going to be fine in America if you're desperate to have a baby, if they don't make it clear that if you're having a miscarriage, you're not going to have a doctor that's afraid of going to prison, those are the things that have really amped up women, because they see this happening. They're going, wait a minute. We've got votes. We've got power. That's what I think really where the Republicans made the mistake, is that they went so extreme in what they've put on the books in so many states. It's really going to make a difference in those swing states.
Yeah, I mean, before it was overturned, Robert Gibbs, Roe had a 67% approval rating as it was. Exceptions for rape and incest, 83%. Exceptions for life of the mother, 93%. So you're not even talking about Democrats. You're talking about 67, 83, and 93% of all Americans. And Republicans are pushing the other direction. The vigilante laws poll just as terribly. Nobody thinks that you should be able to pick up the phone and tell on an Uber driver who drives a woman to the OBGYN. I mean, the fact that Republicans have gone this step of such reprehensible policy, that their own base doesn't support it, should stop the move towards said reprehensible policies, but it hasn't. What do you make of both the politics and the policy rush to the extreme right?
Well, Nicole, I think we will look back on the 2022 election and understand that the moment everything changed was May 2nd, in the evening when Politico reported that the leak of the document that showed the Supreme Court had voted to overturn Roe versus Wade. That began the point in which people began to mobilize, even though the decision didn't come for several more weeks. And I absolutely agree with you and Claire. I mean, if you talk to any Republican pollster, first thing they tell you is there's 90% of the people that support some level of exemptions for life and health of the mother and for rape and incest. And for this really to be a one-two punch of the Supreme Court taking away the right and then the state coming in and putting into place something in its stead that is so draconian and so backwards, it's led, quite frankly, a lot of people, to your point, that wouldn't necessarily vote for a Democrat that are now thinking about, maybe that's the only outlet I have to save some fundamental aspect of this right that preserves some level of protection. I think it's going to be stunning to watch. I think we all read that op-ed. We've seen these voter numbers. We've seen what's happened in these special elections. Democratic voters, because of this decision, are singularly galvanized like nothing else that's happened this year.
Claire, it also pulls the curtain back on this really rotten core on the right. That the kinds of people who wrote the vigilante law in Texas, they were skulking around Republican politics for decades. And then they have their moment because the party has pushed out anyone normal, and it's totally beholden to the far-right extremists. Abbott, in the legislature there let these people in. The folks writing the laws without exceptions for rape and life of mother, same thing, they've skulked about in the shadows, but people who could articulate the perils to anyone who wanted to take advantage of the incredible science behind IVF or surrogacy or anything like that said that you can't do that, unforeseen consequences. Well, what do you make of what it reveals? And I feel like this is part of what voters are intuiting. It's like, oh, that's who the Republicans have become.
Yeah, the extremism. And it's on a number of fronts. But abortion, especially when you're talking about rape and incest, because, there isn't a mother alive who's doesn't have that fear that one of their daughters
or father
has a fear. And so that becomes real and palpable. But extremism is a thread running through the Republican Party right now. Extreme stuff, breaking of norms, a lack of civility. Can you imagine when I'm much older than you are. I can't imagine growing up that there would be a political rally where they would hold up signs that would say the FU word to the sitting president, and they'd all hold them proudly. What is that?
With their kids.
Well, Republicans who see that, they don't like that either. They don't like that kind of coarseness. They don't like that. And so I really do think that this is going to be an election that is going to judge the passion of the extreme on the right to the mobilization of the rest of the country to say we're going to reject it. And I didn't see it coming, but after Dobbs, I see it pretty clearly now. And I particularly see it in states where Florida, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, they thought they could win Arizona. Well, they've got a guy out there who's scrubbing his website to take abortion off his website, right, the Republican, because he knows he's in trouble.
Right. And anyone tied to Trump is tied to overturning Roe because Trump did it with his 3 appointees.
Absolutely. And stated very clearly that was the deal he made with the devil, even though we all know Donald Trump was pro-choice, always was. He made a deal with the Federalist Society that he would publish the name of lists, and that is why Mitch McConnell sat down and quit agitating about it.